And welcome into the Most Accurate Podcast. My name is Anthony Stalter, joined as always by 444.com's John Paulsen. You can follow him, of course, right there at the bottom at 444_John. I'm at Anthony Stalter, and make sure you're checking out all the great content at 444.com. John, another Thursday night in the books. I know that this is a tough one for you to talk about, but you kind of saw this trending with the way the Packers season has been. But we will get into John's Thursday night's thoughts. Christian Watson's breakout, Treylon Burks, we'll get into him a little bit. Of course, the biggest fantasy storylines. We've got one game moving because of weather. We'll get into the sleeper sneaky start of the week and some sneaky starts, as well as dive into the breakout model, see who's popping this week. But John, Thursday night, another week, your Packers coming off the big come-from-behind victory against the Cowboys, but they fall short against the Titans. Are you surprised? Did you think maybe that your boys will start to roll a little bit?
Well, I reckon that you're familiar with the stages of grief when it comes to your football team, Anthony.
Yes.
Sorry to take a shot at the Falcons. I guess
No
that
problem.
makes me feel a little better, but I mean, misery loves company. But I think at a certain point in the season, and correct me if I'm wrong, you just kind of realize that the playoffs aren't going to happen. So you just,
right.
You're in acceptance mode, I think, and. There was a little part of me was like, okay, if they win this, they're 5-6. Maybe they can like pull off an upset against Philly and get back to 6-6, and then they're in the hunt. But I was half watching this on my wife's phone as I was recording my son's basketball game. I'm doing that for the team this year, or
Nice.
at least the away games. So I was having to be really quiet during the recording, so I wasn't reacting to anything either on the court or on the field. But I saw most of the game, or at least parts of it, and I caught up on all the highlights as well. It just looks like the Packers defense didn't play particularly well, and the offense only got 17 points, so you're not going to win very many games that way. But I did think that when I saw that Christian Watson scored another touchdown initially, I was like, okay, so now you can see they're starting to use him in the red zone. I think it was a 14-yarder. And it was more of a jump ball, I think, the first one. And then the second one was a crossing route where they're using his speed to just run away from the defense. So if they can get that going, maybe they get Dobbs back. Maybe next year they'll have a decent receiving core there with those two players being in their second year. Maybe they draft somebody too. But I think, looking rest of season, if you have Christian Watson on your team, you're probably feeling pretty good about starting him on a weekly basis, especially if there's some buys. I do think that, it's, 4 catches, 2 touchdowns on 6 targets. That's not sustainable, but he does have obviously the 5 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And then, when Dobbs comes back, things are going to change a little bit. But, Cobb came back this game, Randall Cobb, and got 6 targets, and it didn't really affect Watson negatively. And Lazard had 11 targets, kind of an inefficient night for him. And then on the other side of the ball, I saw Derrick Henry's jump pass. It's classic that the Packers kind of fell for that because they're just all selling out. But I mean, when you have Derrick Henry running the ball at the goal line, you just got to sell out to try to stop him.
Like, what are you going to do?
He's jump and make a pass like that, then more power to him, I guess. But Treylon Burks, I think is establishing himself as that number 1 option there for the Titans. He had a pretty good game last week, if I remember correctly, and then 7 for 111 and 8 no touchdowns on 8 targets, led the team in targets. And then Austin Hooper, who was kind of I just wanted to mention him. He was like kind of a clunker pick for me, but I thought he had a chance in that offense with all the, the lack of pass catchers. And I just felt like he got buried or just was kind of not buried, but splitting time with Njoku in Cleveland. Just didn't have a chance to play like big snaps for Cleveland after doing really well with your Falcons in Atlanta. And I thought coming to Tennessee, he would be a favorite option, but they do run like a tight end rotation. But he ended up with 2 touchdowns. So my best ball teams that I drafted him are happy this week. But he's long gone on most of my redraft rosters. So interesting that he got what do you think of that first touchdown where he didn't really secure the ball completely?
Yeah, so this is where instant replay can kind of work against you. If you, I guess, if you're a Packers fan, it works with you for the Titans, because when you watch it in real time, or you watch it when they kind of speed it up, it does look like he doesn't secure it and it should be an interception. When you watch it in slow-mo, I'm thinking, well, it's an obvious touchdown because he does look like he secures it. So it's that balance between the real time balls coming out, or you slow it down so much that it looks like he's got it secured, and then it starts to come out. So I guess ultimately I was okay with it. What I wasn't okay with was that they kind of reversed the call in the fields, because initially they said interception, like, nope, it's a touchdown. That is where ultimately that's where the play is going to be decided, right? They're going to fall back on what they called. And initially they called interception. So
yeah, I was surprised. And I saw it and I saw the replay. I was like, I was surprised they overturned it.
Yeah.
Because it's that completing the process of the catch, and he hits the ground. He does have it for a while, and then he loses it as he's still moving. So to me, he's still completing the process of the catch, but obviously I'm a little bit biased. But Dez dropped it. So as long as we know that.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so that's your Thursday. That's your Thursday. Yeah, Dez dropped it. That was a playoff game, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was that or just a late season. I think it might have been a playoff game.
Yeah. All right. Now that we've got John's Thursday night thoughts, and by the way, I agree that Treylon Burks, it looks like he's coming along there, and clearly you could see Watson's breakout. It kind of, and I'm not comparing the two wide receivers at all, and you would have a better recollection than I would on this. It did seem like Devontae Adams started slow, and everybody's talking about, well, you didn't get Aaron Rodgers another receiver. Look at this, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if it was halfway through his first year, maybe even the second year, he exploded.
He was terrible as a rookie.
Yeah,
I think Devontae would admit that. And then everybody was, not everybody, but I mean, Allen Robinson, we thought we could have had him instead. We were kind of ruining that. And then Devontae just kept working on his craft, got better and better and better, and obviously became the best receiver in the game for a stretch. So you got to be patient. I mean, asking these guys to play huge snaps, trying to make a Super Bowl run, it's tough. Like especially dealing with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback.
Yeah, not everybody's going to be Jamar Chase and lights the league on fire right away. All right, this week's biggest fantasy storylines. We're actually going to start off with a game that is moved to Detroit. So you got Buffalo and Cleveland, and because of the snow, it's like they're calling it like thunder snow or something. It's bad, and a lot of people are like, well, you're supposed to play it in the snow. The NFL did the right thing here, John, in my opinion. You can't have people stuck on the roads, and it's not necessarily about the game itself. It's about making sure fans get there safely and back home safely. When was Cleveland going to leave for this? So I thought they did the right thing. I'm all for football playing in the elements, and I know you are too as a Packers fan. But I think they did the right thing here moving into Detroit. There seems to be some real fantasy impact here too, because now you go from outdoors in the element with snow to perfect conditions at Ford Field inside. So from a fantasy perspective, John, what should we know about this game being moved to Detroit?
Yeah, but the day or before that it got moved, I was talking with Chris Allen, our weather expert, and he's like, well, there's going to be a giant blizzard there, but the game conditions aren't bad as of the forecast right now. There was no snow expected during the game. So we were looking at like something like 25 degrees and 20-mile-per-hour winds, which is not great. But if it's not a blizzard either, trying to play in a blizzard. So we were keeping an eye on the total, which I think at that point was 43.5. It was dropping. I think it opened at 46, dropped to 43 by the time that I ran my initial set of numbers. And once they moved it, it was like, okay, I have to rerun everything because, excuse me. So the total jumped to 48.5. It's at 49.5 now. The spread was 8.5, and now it's 7.5. So Vegas apparently thinks, or at least the bettors think, that this helps Cleveland a little bit to stay close. But yes, from a fantasy standpoint, it's so much better to be playing in a dome than in either a blizzard or playing outside in freezing temperatures and 20-mile-per-hour winds. So, everybody moved up for the Bills. Gabe Davis went from about 18 to 11. Stephon Diggs, I think, moved into number 1 overall receiver, just because of the way the equations work with adjusting that over under and then the implied team total for the Bills. The Browns receivers also moved up. Chubb moved down a little bit because of just the nature of the. Then I had to kind of switch things around because you're looking at the Browns as kind of a run heavier team, but then you're wondering in this particular game they might have to throw it a little bit more than they want to if the Bills jump out to a 10, 14 point lead. Are they going to be able to stick with Chubb in the running game? So I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is a live start this week in the dome, and certainly the Bills receivers are all good to go. Cooper is low end wide receiver 1 play now, and I even picked up, as I may live to regret this, but on our league, Anthony, I picked up Jacoby Brissett to play this week because I've got Kyler Murray on the shelf, and I'm not sure if he's going to be available Monday night. So yeah. I'm going to roll the dice and see if at least he runs the ball a little bit, and if he has to try to play catch up, maybe he can get me a decent fantasy day this week.
Yeah, he can put together big games, as you know. All right, so moving on, Paul Hardman going to the IR because of an ab injury. Kadarius Toney was acquired from the Giants a couple of weeks ago at the trade deadline. What is Kadarius Toney's rest of season outlook look like for the Chiefs now that especially Hardman is placed on the IR?
If you remember when the trade happened, I was like, well, he's coming into a team that, Hardman's playing well. They spent a lot of money on Marquise Valdes-Scantling, who does different things, clear out routes and uses that speed to go deep a lot in that offense. Juju Smith-Schuster playing really well. So I thought this would be kind of a learning experience over the next 4 to 6 weeks for Kadarius as he tried to work his way into the rotation. Maybe he would be used on a few packages here and there and play 20, 30, 40% of the snaps at best with those 3 healthy. But the seas have parted for him with Juju on the shelf this week with a concussion, unlikely to play. Hardman dealing with abdomen illness, which is interesting. Yeah. Designation. I don't know what the deal is with that. Doesn't sound great, but the fact that he's on IR means he's going to be out 4 games. I hope he gets the treatment he needs. I'm sure he will. Hopefully he gets better. But you're just looking at week 10 and to Tony's just as this was a game that Juju left early, Hardman missed. So Toney was kind of running as maybe the third or in a rotation with Sky Moore and Justin Watson. And he ended up with 4 catches, 57 yards, a touchdown, two carries for 33 yards, 19 points PPR. That's a really, really good second game for a guy who played 9% of the snaps the week before. So, yeah, I think that this is a situation, if he's out there in the waiver wire, he might be on some of these shallow leagues, but his prospects are definitely looking up with Hardman out. It does seem like they want to get him on the field alongside Juju and MVS. And it does seem like he's ahead of Sky Moore and Justin Watson at this point.
Let's talk about the Chargers wide receivers now. So same game. It's that Sunday night football matchup between Kansas City and the Chargers. It would appear that the wide receivers for the Chargers are getting healthier again. Keenan Allen got in a limited session yesterday, which would be Thursday. We're recording this on Friday. And then Mike Williams was also he also participated Wednesday and Thursday, probably in a limited fashion, John. But when it comes to that Sunday night matchup, I highly doubt we're going to see Mike Williams. But what about Keenan Allen?
Well, yeah, the fact that they were both completely DNPs last week, and now they're putting together back-to-back limited practices, I believe, that is certainly an upgrade. So I don't know if we'll see Williams. Allen seems closer, but if they both end up playing, I think the question is what happens to Josh Palmer, and is he still startable? I think maybe this week he still is due to the nature of the position. There's a number of teams and good receivers on bye. There's obviously a lot of injuries happening. So, but we're getting used to Palmer in a big role. I mean, in week 6 he had 12 targets. Atlanta week 9 he had 10 targets, and week 10 he had 8 targets. So we're kind of used to seeing him in that sort of wide receiver one role. But if Keenan Allen is back, and certainly if both of them are back, then Palmer becomes a lot more dicey as the number three receiver for that team. I think it's obviously good news for Justin Herbert, who's just, throwing to this really, really banged up receiving core, and it just doesn't look like himself exactly in the passing game without his trusted receivers out there.
John, what's your advice for fantasy managers for the stretch run? Because you've got injuries, you've got schedules, you got weather now impacting. Everybody's trying to get an advantage for their playoffs, or whether to make it or make a decent run. So, what's your best advice for how to prep for the stretch run?
Yeah, if you're looking good for the playoffs, you can kind of start planning for the last 3 weeks of the season or last 2 weeks of the season, depending on how your league's playoffs play out. I think once you start getting past your buys, you don't need to have as much running back receiver depth. So you can do some, I think this is the last week for trades, a lot of leagues. You can do some 2-for-1 trades to try to upgrade your starters. But you don't need necessarily to have, if you're starting 2 running backs, you don't necessarily need to have more than 3 or 4 on the roster rest of season. If your guys are solid and you're going to be able to start them, and there's no more buys coming up. So as long as your buys are covered, it's a good time to sort of use whatever depth you have to try to increase your starters upside. And I start to also look at my if I don't have an elite defense, I start to perhaps carry 2 defenses and plan ahead so that I'm not fighting with people to try to pick up the best matchups each week. I mean, there's certain leagues where you go and somebody's got a matchup with the worst offense, and there's a bidding frenzy, but the week before that you can get them for free. So right. You carry 2, and then you're just playing committee and planning ahead and dropping them as you need to try to sort of plan out good matchups for the rest of season. Kind of the same thing with kicker, but not as important to do that with kicker. I think there's less of a pressure to get kickers on the waiver wire than there is defenses. And then, a quarterback, backup quarterback in case of calamity, you might be rolling with Jalen Hurts. I'm not sure when their bye is. I think it's actually week 14, but I might be mistaken there. Gardner Minshew, picking him up as a backup plan, or having another fantasy backup that's a starter in order to sort of play quarterback by committee there if you need to. You have a good option if something were to happen to somebody like Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray or whoever. You can use that bench space to sort of plan for that, as opposed to having RB6, RB7, wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 guys that are not going to see your starting lineup.
All right, we'll go through the Week 11 injury roundup. We'll get your quick hit thoughts, John, on these injuries. I'll fire away, and then take over. AJ Brown limited with ankle and potentially just looking at some rest. Eagles just taking it easy potentially with AJ Brown. That would be the question for you. DeAndre Hopkins did not practice on Thursday with a hamstring injury. We could talk a little bit about Marquise Brown. Gus Edwards limited on Thursday, and this Ravens running back situation, personally, with the way that Kenyon Drake has played, I do think that they should stick with Kenyon Drake, but interested in your thoughts. Mark Andrews limited on Thursday. This will impact Isiah Likely in his role. Jerry Jeudy did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. Cortland Sutton has seen a lot of targets, not necessarily efficient, though, based on those targets, or the number of targets, I should say. Matthew Stafford, he did get cleared. You wonder if any of the Rams receivers, though, are trustworthy. Cooper Kupp out. Do managers keep Kupp with his injury? Kyler Murray, as you mentioned earlier, you've got him on one of your teams, limited with a hamstring injury. The Cardinals don't play until Monday Night Football. And then Devontae Adams, limited on Thursday, but seems likely to play.
Yeah, that's quite a list of players. But yeah, AJ Brown, I think, will play. DeAndre Hopkins' situation, we've got to monitor it today to see if that was just a rest day or what. But it's also, they play on Monday night, so basically their Thursday is really their Wednesday. not as big a deal for a veteran to rest on Wednesday. I'm interested to find out which hamstring. I saw one note that it was the right hamstring, but I'm not sure if that was correct. That's where he's had repeated hamstring strains, and if that's popping up again, that could be an issue. We'll see what he does today and tomorrow. But yeah, Marquise Brown, I saw some video of him in practice, and he looks good. So I think his plan was to come back this week, and he may be back. So if he does return, you're probably looking for a slight downgrade for Hopkins, maybe a sizable downgrade for Rondale Moore. But they suddenly have a pretty good receiving core there with those three. But they lost Zach Ertz, so look for Trey McBride there to step in and play a lot of snaps. We'll see how many targets he gets. As for the Ravens, I got a couple questions about Gus Edwards in my Discord AMA for subscribers. And, my thinking is I'm kind of with you that Drake has been playing well. They did give Gus Edwards a big workload his first game back from his knee injury, week 7 against Cleveland, 16 carries, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was 11 for 65 the next game. So, he's got 4.85 yards per carry, looking good, looking like Gus the Bus, right? Then he kind of tweaks his hamstring, and you don't know how much that's related to the knee or just, not playing football for that long. So I do wonder if they'll come back and just give him the starting job again with Drake playing well, or if they'll kind of split it. So right now in the projections, I have Drake ahead of Gus Edwards. I would like to see Edwards with a full practice before I really trust him, in my lineup. But this week it's kind of weird, with all the teams on bye and all the injuries, that you might need to start Gus as a flex and just hope for the best that, he gets 10 or 12 carries and maybe gets a touchdown. Or maybe they just decide, he's our starter and, we're going to give him 16 carries again, like they did back in week 7. I sort of do lean Drake there. He's running well, 4.7 yards per carry, if I remember correctly. Mark Andrews seems like he's on track to play. John Harbaugh is kind of tough to read when it comes to injuries, but he did say that he has a really good chance to play. So I'm hoping for my teams where I've got him that he plays. But Isiah likely is a good option. You should just definitely have a pivot if you can't count on Andrews. Jerry Jeudy seems like he's going to miss this week. As for Stafford being back, that does make, Allen Robinson, I'm just going to call him Ben S, and Van Jefferson, so, dart throw type guys. I mean, you don't want to have to start those guys. I mean, Tyler Higbee's probably the safest start in that offense. And after that, I would say Allen Robinson. But it's just going to be so weird to see the Rams without Cooper Kupp and that offense without Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
But I think Van Jefferson has probably got the most talent of that receiving core now as it stands. Kyler Murray, I not feeling great about his chances of playing. If you really want to wait for him, he did do some limited work yesterday, which is a good sign for a Monday night game. But I did also see that another report saying that he was probably another week away, and they might not be in a rush to go back to him with, Colt McCoy played pretty well last week. So if you want to wait on him, I would pick up Colt McCoy, and that's your pivot. But otherwise, you might want to just find your best streaming option and go ahead and start him. And then finally, Devontae Adams, I think you mentioned him. I'm not too worried about him. Limited, seems likely to play. They don't seem too alarmed by his injury right now.
All right, that's your fantasy week 11 injury roundup. Time for the sleeper sneaky start of the week. Sleeper is one of the fastest growing customizable fantasy football platforms in the industry. You can head to sleeper.com or download the latest app today. As John and I tell you each and every week, we enjoy using Sleeper, not only sleeper.com, but the Sleeper fantasy app. Easy to use. Once of course you get kind of familiarized with the website, it's very easy to use. And when it comes to drafting, we enjoy it. We've used it the last couple of years, and it's just another platform that, quite frankly, makes your experience each and every week in fantasy football that much more enjoyable. But this week, the sleeper sneaky start of the week is Isiah Pacheco of the Chiefs, the rookie running back, John.
Yeah, and I just was chuckling because I remember your rant after one of our drafts on another platform, and you were so upset about the draft and how it went because of buggy software. But
Yeah.
Sleeper's been great. Like
I get
Sleeper's been
angry
really slick.
sometimes, John.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you had a bad draft too, by the way.
I did.
All right. Anyway, Pacheco. Yeah. Now this is with a caveat. The Chiefs did say that it wasn't a total, depth chart change with Clyde Edwards-Helaire barely playing in that last game. Pacheco, his snaps and touches spiked. He had 16 touches, played 55% of the snaps for both season highs. He doesn't do much in the passing game. He did run 15 routes in this last game, so there might be some, meat on the bone, as John Daigle likes to say there. Like maybe he can get some catches. But the matchup is really what's happening here with the Chargers. They've given up 164 total yards, 5.72 yards per carry, 1.44 touchdowns to the running back position this season. So even if Edwards-Helaire works in and gets a little bit more work, I do see that Pacheco, if he's getting 12, 14 carries, that he should be able to put up 60 yards and maybe a touchdown this week.
All right, let's move forward. We're here with John's sneaky starts. It's week 11. As we like to say, it's an appetizer when we talk about it in the podcast. If you go to 444.com, you'll see all of John's sneaky starts. He gives several options for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and for tight ends. But we'll give you a couple here just to kind of whet the appetite. But Russell Rusty Wilson of the Broncos is a quarterback that you like against that not so athletic, not very good Las Vegas Raiders defense.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to call him Rusty Wilson until he has a proper game, proper fantasy game. I wrote in the article, this is the week where the resistible force meets the movable object.
There you go.
As the Broncos offense squares off against the Raiders defense. The Raiders defense makes everyone look good. There's tons of opportunity available when you play the Raiders. But he's, Wilson has been disappointing, but he's posted at least 13.8 points in 3 straight games, which isn't great, but at least he's getting a decent floor. But the Raiders have yielded an average of 22.2 fantasy points to quarterback position this year. So those are easy QB1 numbers. So I think this is the week that if you have them and you have them in a committee at this point, this is the week to start them with the matchup. Every quarterback who's played the Raiders has scored at least 16.7 fantasy points this week, this year. So this is the week for Wilson, I think. Even though he's dealing with that injury with Judy, I think he's got a chance to have 2 touchdowns and 30 yards rushing or something like that.
Darius Slayton is one of the wide receivers that you wanted to highlight on the podcast. He's playing a Detroit defense that, how do I put this, isn't very good.
Yeah, they're 21st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to receivers, which was actually better than what I thought when I was getting ready to write them up. But they give up a lot of points, and Slayton has been playing really well for the Giants. Kenny Golladay was back last week, but didn't really impact Slayton's playing time. Slayton has 66 yards or more and/or a touchdown in 4 of his last 5 games. So quietly in a not great passing attack, he's quietly posting solid wide receiver 3 type numbers. The Lions have given up 179 yards, 0.89 touchdowns on average to the receiver position this year. So he's got a chance to have another good game.
And then if you're looking for a tight end, Trey McBride might be an option, especially with Zach Ertz out. Now, of course, this is the Monday night matchup, Arizona and San Francisco.
Yeah, I don't have him ranked real high, but McBride is interesting from the standpoint that the position is just desolate. Ertz is out for the year, so there's a big hole to fill. Now they might just fill it with Rondale Moore. Once they get Marquise Brown back, they might just use more in as opposed to throwing it to the tight end. And McBride has played quite a few snaps and hasn't seen many targets. So, the question is right now as a rookie, how is his route running, sense of the game translating into fantasy points for managers right now? But given the Ertz injury and the fact that McBride was the former John Mackey Award winner for Nation's top tight end, he's pretty good. He caught 90 passes for 1,121 yards, only 1 touchdown, which was interesting. As a senior at Colorado State, he runs a 4.6 40-yard dash. So, and he was the first tight end drafted, as you remember, Anthony. So, there's some upside here. I don't know. I don't trust rookie tight ends. There's probably better, I'd rather run Foster Moreau out there, for the next few weeks while Darren Waller's on IR. But if you are hurting at tight end, maybe you want somebody that you collect it. You're starting to collect these young tight ends. You got a Dulcich, you got a McBride. Maybe you're planning for the playoffs, and you might want to kind of pick up a prospect. I think McBride is somebody like that. And this week the matchup's not great. The 49ers are fourth in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends, but I would have to think that McBride's going to play 80-90% of the snaps and run a lot of routes. So he'll be out there, and they may or may not have DeAndre Hopkins. So that I think that gives him a little bit of upside.
All right, we'll wrap things up here on 444.com. It's the most accurate podcast by talking about the breakout receiver model. If you go to 444.com, you'll see the entire list, and this is a list that just kind of projecting which wide receivers and tight ends might break out. And John, when you're looking at the list, it's always nice to see some of the big names that are supposed to pop that might not have. And I know Mike Evans is one of those wide receivers that has appeared on the breakout receiver model.
Yeah, and he has for a few weeks. He's been due. So I'm just going to keep talking about him until he has that week, and then I'm going to say I told you so. But he's just getting the usage. He's getting the usage. I mean, 13.3 expected fantasy points per game. He's been scoring 9.9 last 3 weeks, so he's minus 3.4. He's due for a touchdown. We saw, although this week they're on bye, right? So this is not a good week to start Mike Evans, but starting him out of the bye next week, I would definitely do that. Greg Dulcich. We talked about Russell Wilson. Dulcich is averaging 13.6 expected fantasy points and has only scored 6.2. So he's minus 7.5. Seems like a good player. Had 3 good games to start his career. Had kind of a clunker last week, but I think against the Raiders, he's a quality start. I would also add Cortland Sutton into that. He's been struggling, but if you have him, given the short week with Jerry Jeudy likely out, I would have to think he's going to see 10 targets. And given the KJ Hamler's out too, I'd have to think he's going to be pushing for 10 targets against the Raiders. So you would think he'd catch 5 of those for something. And then finally, Pat Freiermuth is popping on the model this week, and he's got a pretty good rapport with Kenny Pickett. His efficiency, P10 efficiency is about 110%. So he's a good player. He's been a good player in his career and typically is efficient. So I would think that he would bounce back and maybe find the end zone this week.
All right. That's John Paulsen, another great podcast here with John Paulsen, 444.com. Again, 444.com is where you're going to find season-long betting, DFS, great content, great articles, great statistics. If you're somebody that doesn't necessarily know what you're looking for when it comes to the data, and you want just somebody to tell you, great. 444.com is perfect for you. If you're somebody that doesn't necessarily want to have the data broken down for you, you just want the raw data and you want to make your own conclusions, again, we've got all kinds of tools at 444.com to help you win season long or DFS. And that content is produced all week long, and it's always the reads are always fantastic, whether John's posting his sneaky starts or somebody else is doing the DFS breakdown or betting. So I highly encourage you to go to 444.com and do what we do. Appreciate you either listening or watching us here on the Most Accurate Podcast. John, I know we're in discussions right now about next week. We hope to record a podcast, but we're kind of working through some schedules with it being Thanksgiving week.
No, I think we decided it's going to be too busy in both of our households to record quietly. So we're going to take next week off, and then we'll pick it up in 2 weeks. Three
little ones. They'd be making appearances constantly, and I don't know if fantasy managers want to sit there and watch my kids run around as we try to record. So we'll see everybody in 2 weeks. On that note, have a great weekend to everybody. Best of luck, and have a very happy Thanksgiving next week. And John and I will be back in 2 weeks for the Most Accurate Podcast, and then we gear up for fantasy playoffs. So again, for John Paulsen, I'm Anthony Stalter. We'll see you next time on the Most Accurate Podcast.